Good morning, Cyber City. My name is Vincubus, and this is TheAltPath. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new, welcome back. And it is time for a review of this new Toby Fox produced Deltarune expansion, Chapters 3 and 4. Now, as I'm sure is going to be a very common story, I've been a fan of Toby Fox's work for many years. Undertale, of course, changed the gaming landscape as we know it, and when the first chapter of Deltarune shadow dropped several years later, it became all but certain that eventually Toby Fox was going to climb the ladder to actualization again. And while that streak of ambiguity was almost certainly broken by the Nintendo deal, see Chapter 5 being cut from this expansion, I must admit it was cool to be able to plan around the release of this one. And while I do think that Chapter 2 has not aged as well as Chapter 1 has, a portal to hell opening in my foyer could not have stopped me from going full suit and tie for this new release. And thankfully, I was not disappointed by it even a little bit. Which is why I'm feeling a solid 9 on this new Deltarune update. And here's why I think that. In broad strokes, Chapters 3 and 4 gave us exactly what we were all hoping for from this new expansion. A more explicit and direct focus on the mechanics of the world, and a more blatant emphasis placed on the various shots of darkness that were only peppering the first two chapters. One chapter perhaps more so than the other. And I think what's most exciting about these new releases is that even though we were all expecting peak given the hat trick that Toby has thus far pulled off in the public eye, I find my hair being blown back with the amount of risks taken by both the gameplay and the story. I think it takes a lot of guts to hold back on showing the crowd the glitzy and glamorous world of Chapter 3, instead relegating the first half of the chapter almost entirely to a lower bit space, with simpler and quite frankly derivative mechanics, but ultimately done in a way that still feels distinctly Deltarune, putting yet another mile of distance between Toby Fox's work and the countless imitators following suit. And what's more, the new design space opens itself up to a million different gags which never would have worked otherwise, making the 8-bit segments feel less like a gimmick and more like a new avenue for the characters to express themselves. The hero's camaraderie has never been more striking. And while Susie's real character chapter is the next one, I like how this chapter serves as the bridge between Chapter 2's Susie and Chapter 4's Susie. There are slight shifts in her token foolhardiness that make her seem a lot more real as a person. And what's more, the chapter does a great job of closing the gap between Susie and Chris, really showing and not telling that they're not as different as you might have thought in Chapter 1. And Ralsei too becoming less of a stickler and more of a little brother type might be just as fun to watch. But let's talk about the man of the hour, Mr. Anthony Tenna. I will admit I was initially skeptical of the guy. I was worried he and Spamton might have shared too much DNA, and as it turns out, I was wrong about that in some ways, and right about that in others. If you know, you know. Tenna as a figure does a great job of holding the chapter together. I like how despite being as goofy as he has insane presence. And I love how his manipulative behavior becomes more and more toxic as it goes. Even if the so-called Hellboard might have been a little much for me personally. And the other major thing, the fraudster herself, what do I even say about that moment? It's one of the best moments in the history of video game storytelling. The last 10 minutes of Chapter 3, or I guess 10 hours depending on how you go about it, are some of the most pulse-pounding gameplay I've ever had in my life. Just genuine mental pandemonium. Only other major thing about this chapter that I do want to bring up is that the game actually kinda tanked a lot while I was trying to get the egg. I don't know what happened between Chapters 2 and 3, but all of a sudden, finding the egg collectibles has become the biggest pain in the fucking ass. The game switches from quirky with the dark side to faux philosophical and convoluted, with such a start that it is completely mind-blowing, and unfortunately not in a good way. Though, getting on the game's case about that is kind of like getting on Pokemon's case for missing no being hard to find. It doesn't feel fair. I will say, the secret boss stuff being so missable is frustrating. And I do think that Toby has in the past figured out better ways to make chapters that are supposed to be replayed feel unique on the second go-around. See the dialogue changing in Undertale, for example. But I also know how careful Toby is about seeding out his canon, and I know that that would trip a lot of undue alarm bells, so I'm inclined to forgive it, especially considering the ending doesn't hit quite the same way if you're stuck on it for hours. It's more about the velocity at which things go to shit that really makes it work. But now, shifting our focus to Chapter 4, this is the one that's really got folks talking. It was actually holding a spot in the top 10 highest rated game releases ever on backlogs for quite a long time, and it is not hard to see why. Even more so than the blatant symbolism in Chapter 3's alt route, Chapter 4 lays it all bare. There's a plethora of incredible risks taken in this chapter, like the amount of time spent outside of the Dark World, the stuff involving the Dark Fountains, the overt religious themes, and the relationship of Chris and the Soul being just so focal as well. This chapter really takes all those things that I thought were going to be relegated to theory fodder and just shows us them in broad daylight. Long gone are the days of Ralsei healing the final boss. Now we're dealing with characters who are actively finding creative solutions to complicated problems. I imagine this must be similar to how it was when Oreo first decided milk was a part of their brand, and that accepted truths in the underground circles all of a sudden become the whole crux of the main story. I find myself at odds with the prophecy in every way possible, and yet it's still hard to say this chapter was about anything else. And the themes of can the prophecy be changed and what's even in it are fascinating. And while the game expressly tells us that our choices don't matter, we're playing a game called Deltarune. Changed text. And even though I feel like I know what the missing puzzle pieces are, we've been getting reveals far sooner than I thought we ever could, and so I'm willing to be proven wrong, if not expecting it. But what's probably most important to bring up about this chapter is how cinematic it is. Maybe it's the more ethereal music choices, maybe it's that deep dark color palette, maybe it's the headiness of what's going on around you, but I would say for the last 3 hours of gameplay, my heart was in my throat. There's a moment in a long hallway with a bunch of bullets, and the way the characters play off their reasoning for why they do what they do in that segment is just so squishy. I just want to hug all of them. It's beautiful. I think it's quite potent that the chapter about religion and faith has so many sections that are in complete darkness. It forces you to trust your ears and your gut over your eyes, and gives the whole chapter this unsteady feeling that doesn't let up for the entire thing. Save for the odd joke. The old man is so goddamn funny, I can't even with it. And Jackenstein might be my favorite boss fight, maybe ever. He killed me because I was laughing so hard I was not looking at the screen. That's something. Honestly, I think my biggest issue with the chapter was that I started getting fatigued because it just had me feeling so much. It's like too good for its own good. I found myself getting kind of annoyed with the bosses in the second half, and while I do feel that is partially because the enemy patterns in this chapter are perhaps less impressive than they have been in other chapters, the fact that those fights aren't super memorable only kinda helps the story chug along that much faster. The only other thing I'll say is that the Mike segment did confuse me. I don't know if I liked it. I think I liked it. But again, any of these criticisms that I have are pretty much completely forgiven by watching other people's playthroughs. Moments that I thought dragged even the tiniest bit wound up being my favorite parts of other people's playthroughs when I watched through those. And in the inverse, I find myself getting a little mad when folks aren't laughing as hard as I was at various moments of the game. It's the perfect balance of fan service and self-indulgence for the devs, ultimately making one of the most thrilling game experiences of the year. As I'm recording this, Silksong comes out tomorrow, so I may just eat those words, but I seriously can't fucking wait for Chapter 5. It feels like the year gap between Infinity War and Endgame all over again for me. And you can be on the lookout for another yellow flannel hat when that does come out, because Toby and his team just do not miss.